Okay, now I'm recording. Cool. The history of that name, I think, is kind of odd. It goes back, if you start kind of looking at the history of Oboe itself. Let me pull up Oboe on npm, and maybe we can start from there. And so one of the things that they say here, Oboe is kind of built on top of, they mention this term Sax, S-A-X. And if we look at the repo, it kind of mentions, I believe it mentions that it was a fork. Oh, I can't remember where I saw it, but underneath it, it's using something called Clarinet, which is a Sax parser. So there's some musical things going on. So rewinding a little bit, because the explanation of it is kind of goes back a ways. So back in the day when we used to deal with XML and HTML parsing kind of things. So a lot of times when we were sending our data back and forth as XML, one way to deal with that data was using a DOM parser and working with the DOM. And you're kind of familiar with that, right? Working with jQuery and vanilla JavaScript, you're familiar with working with the DOM, or the document object model, right?
Yeah.
So that's one way to deal with it. The problem with dealing with DOM is that you have to have the entire thing loaded. And you have to wait until the whole thing's there before you can do anything with it. Kind of like the same problem we want to solve here, right? Your traditional Ajax waits for the entire thing to be loaded, and then you can work with it. So that's kind of the normal DOM methodology. Well, going back to the days of XML, as we started needing to work with larger XML documents, we started to find that DOM was not a very efficient tool because of all those delays that it introduced. So one of the things that came up is there's a different way to deal with XML data called Sax, S-A-X. And what does that stand for? I think it's Simple XML Parser or something like that. Definition. What is that?
I get it, like saxophone, and then
Yeah,
something else, right?
there it is. Simple API for XML. That's what it's short for.
We just see VS Code, by the way.
What is what?
We just see
Oh,
VS Code. Somehow we see your mouse moving still, though.
yeah, because that's how that works. So I keep pushing the wrong button. I only shared VS Code because, I'm only needing to look at that. Yeah. So if you kind of look through there, the documentation, there's DOM and Sax, and so Sax stands for Simple API for XML. That was another way to deal with it. But anyway, so Oboe is built on that Sax. Yes, Sax sounds like saxophone. So then there's a library called Clarinet, which is a Sax parser, and then Oboe uses Clarinet. Yeah, Oboe, Clarinet, and saxophone. That's kind of where it comes from. It's more a joke than anything. But it's in this family of Sax parsers. The difference is that, basically Clarinet and Oboe are sort of like Sax parsers for JSON instead of XML. Because it turns out that technique that we used for parsing XML efficiently still applies and works really well with JSON as well. Okay, so back to what I was going to look at. So, it actually might be worth doing a quick example of looking at how to do some of that conversion, because I've got the back end built already in the sense that I've got this API search route. Maybe we look at, throwing a quick interface on that to kind of see how that pans out. So if I look at, what's happening with Oboe, let's say maybe in the views, I'm going to add a new view. So I'll call this, let me move over to my other keyboard. Search dot handlebars. So I've got my search dot handlebars view in there. Let's just give it a basic starting point. So there's a main tag that's a container. And this is my search page. So we can start with that and maybe put a div in here, and I'll give this an ID of search results. Okay, so my goal is to kind of populate that on page load. So what scripts, if I'm going to start populating data in there, well, what scripts do I depend on? Well, first I need to make sure that I have Oboe brought in. So I'm going to add that in here. And the reason I'm adding these things towards the bottom of the view is that I had removed them from my main layout to try and keep the examples separated so that they didn't bring in dependencies that they weren't using, if that makes sense. So in order for us to be able to do this, we'll want jQuery and we'll want the Oboe as well. Any questions so far?
Makes sense. And we're going to do the majority of the work in the main.js file.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's where I would expect most of your main.js. But to make a simple example, it's just a lot easier to have everything kind of in one place. So in here, I would say then, okay, well, we want to do something when the page loads. So I might stick in there. Remember, boop, boop, boop. So we say when the page loads is when I want to go get the data, at least initially, right? But I know that I'm going to potentially need to get that data more than once because I want to get that data when the page loads. I may also want to get that data when the user submits the form. So oftentimes it makes sense to go maybe make that a separate method. So maybe I'll say const perform search. And so this is going to execute and go actually run the search. And then that's what I call here. So I can say initially when the page loads, let's run that. But let's also, when the search form's submitted, then I might want to say let's also call perform search. So we'll probably need to give that an ID. I haven't put a search form in there yet, but if I were to have one, I'd want to do it when the form is submitted. On submit. Does that kind of make sense as a skeleton so far? Because we need to do it initially when the page loads, but we also want to do it anytime that the query is executed. Anytime they execute the form.
But we're going to move that to main, right?
Yeah, I mean, whatever you put in here, I would move to main, basically. And you may have to rename it a little bit, if you have more than one search interface. So you might have you might need to put the name of the entity that you're searching in there. So I need probably, I can come back to the search form because we don't have one yet. That's fine. I can leave that there for a moment. So effectively in here, the first thing I need to do is go access that route. So in the simple case where we're not having a form, I might just say oboe, and we're going to go to /API search. Okay. And then if I look back, kind of remember, there's a few different methods we want to implement. We want to implement the node, the done, and the fail cases. Kind of bring those over and strip out the logic that's there. So I want to do something when there's a new node. I want to do something potentially when it's done, and I want to do something when it fails. So things that I could do potentially when I get a search result, I might say, I think this is pulling back products, and I believe those products have names. So an easy place to start would be to just add a node that shows the name. So for instance, if I say in the search results is where we want to update. So in there I would say $. So go to the search results and let's add, or I think it is append. And we want to append a new element there. So that element we can write out as a string, and it will end up turning it in, dealing it with as HTML, and adding it in. So an easy thing to do might be, say, let's start with a div tag. In reality, we'd probably want to build this up to a card. We can do that in a minute. But basically, let's say we are adding a div, and we're just going to show the name. Does that make sense so far?
In the sample, I think you had it where you was working with chunks and pushing.
Yeah. So ignore the chunking for a minute. It's an optimization.
Okay.
It's not required to make it work, but it does make it work faster. So, starting with that, I can go to NodeMon, get my server up and running, and as soon as we get it up and running, let's see, I want to go to /search. This is where I'd like it to be, but remember, I still have not implemented that route, right? So I still need to go back to server.js and make sure we implement a route for that. And here I'm just going to add it in to index.js, call it search, and just tell it to render that search view. Now I probably want to set the title to something, so I'm just going to say title is search, just so I have something there. Okay, So initially we get here and nothing's there. Let's look at the console because I think something's going wrong. Because I should see some data. Okay, so I get in here. We do have a name, but things do not appear to be getting added. So I'm getting data back. But why is that? Oh, because my selector's wrong. Of course. So if I want to say here, that's an ID selector. There we go. So you can start seeing that the data is being pulled in, right? So part of the trick is figuring out how to take the data that comes back and turn it into, something that you can see. So typically that means that you're going to show things as cards. And so if we want to say, well, this outer div here, we want to turn this into a card. So class card. And I'm going to start bringing this down a little bit so that I can read it easier. So you remember typically a card has a card head and a card body. So I'm going to add in that here. Now is it card header or card head? I forget. /div. But I guess I'll see in a minute. So let's say I want to just put a simple card together, which would be the name is in the head and the description is in the body. Let's see how that works. There we go. Okay. Now it's definitely not head. It looks like it's header. Right. There we go. And I want to add a little bit margin between those. So MB3. Right. So you can start to see that it's pulling back search results and showing them. Everybody see that? Paul?
Yeah, it looks good.
So that's kind of your starting point to seeing, pulling those things out as you're kind of putting these things together. Again, the example I was trying to give is basically simplified in terms of like, well, here's the individual pieces and start to figure out how to put things together. I want to fix my indentation one step because this is off. So one of the things I notice in here is I'd put some loading text initially in there, right? And at some point I'd like to get rid of that, right? So what could I do to take care of that? Well, one thing I might do, maybe rather than this being just floating there, maybe we put it in some sort of spinner. So if I remember right, going back to one of these examples, there's the spinner. So the spinner would have, say, class. Does it have a spinner and spinner? I think it's just spinner border. Is that all it was? Yeah, so spinner border. Let me see if that actually turned into a spinner.
Where did you get all this spinner stuff? Did you create that, or is that part of the Oboe library?
The spinner is actually part of Bootstrap. That's a Bootstrap spinner right there.
Okay.
So if you look at their documentation, they've got a few different things you can use. They've got a progress bar, but they've got the spinner. The whole point of a spinner is that it gives you kind of indeterminate state. Just say, hey, it's working. So the actual their example is a little bit complicated compared to what you actually need. Really, just you need this class spinner border, and you can then change the colors as well if you would so choose. So that's all I'm starting with. Is just a thing that has the class spinner border. So if we say that there, that I can show, and then I could say, well, when it's done loading, we could hide that. So I might say down here, we go to ID search results, and then within that, it's class spinner border. And we just want to say, well, we want to hide it, so maybe I add class D none. Right. So I just say, well, once the results are done, once the results are in, let's hide it. And so you can actually see it goes away almost instantaneously because it actually loads so quickly. Right. So you've got some initial, search results, and those are just loading on page load. Any questions so far on that?
Only thing I see is I thought perform search was by itself. Okay, never mind.
So that's maybe where I'd want to start. So show the search results, and then when we're done, we want to do hide the spinner, and if anything goes wrong, we want to show some sort of error message. And you can implement that a whole bunch of ways. It's basically just, hey, you get this call back, so do something about it. But to think about how we hook the form in there, right? So if we start putting a form in, I might go up here, make this form, and this would be this is obviously a get method. I want it to be for sure, although I'm not actually going to use that. But what I do need to have in there is this is ID search form, because I'm going to refer to that. So in here, we might want to have some search fields. So let's say...
What about action? No action on it?
Well, the action, I would expect it to post back to the same page it's on. So the action is going to be kind of implied to be the current page.
Okay.
So I'm going to actually leave that out because it actually doesn't provide any value to set the action. It only means that it can get out of sync. So I could set the action there, for instance, to /search. But then potentially if I rename this page or move it to a different route, then I have to update that. So it actually saves me some errors not setting that. So if I say maybe form group, and here we have this is going to be my input. So label for this is Q. This is my search keywords. And input ID is Q, name is Q. And remember, the reason I'm using Q is because of how my backend's implemented. It expects these keywords in as Q. So type would be search. And maybe I want to give a hint here, placeholder, red, leather, boots. Give them some hints about what to put there. And maybe I want to give a place for the category and start that out as just a simple input box as type text. So category and maybe a submit button in here now. So button type submit. Text on that would be search. And I need to bootstrapify these a little bit, so that would be class btn primary, and this is class form control. Class form control for this one as well. So if I look at that here, right, so now I've got a kind of a search box that I can see. I might want to do a quick border on there. So let's say, let's add a class border, just so it sets it off a little bit, and maybe MB3, so it's easier to see where the search box is. And I probably need some padding to push that in. So P3. So just kind of roughing out a simple search interface. So I've got a place for keywords and I've got a space for a category, right? Now, as is, if I type anything in there, notice that the keywords are not used yet, but you'll also notice every time I click, it's actually adding more search results, right? So there's some things that obviously still need to be done, right? So let's say first, two pieces to that. Obviously, I need to factor in the keywords, and B, I need to remove all the results that are there previously. Cool. So how would I go about removing the results that are there previously? Well, I probably want to do something in perform search before I go initiate that search, so that it kind of clears it out. So if I maybe say search for search results, and I might want to maybe set HTML to empty. That should clear out anything that's currently in there every time I hit search, which you can kind of see the progress bar now. The page doesn't get taller just by doing that. Now, I do have a little bit of a problem in the sense that, the way I did this just now, I lost my spinner, right? By doing that, I lost my spinner. I'd like to keep my spinner around. So one way I might do that and make that simpler to deal with is, well, let's just move the spinner outside of the search results. And it probably shouldn't have been in the search results in the first place, but I'm going to move it out of the search results and give it an ID, and maybe I give that an ID of search results spinner.
Couldn't you just do search results index 1 HTML? Would that do it?
Well, the problem is I'm putting all the things in as elements of this search results, right? So I'd have to tell it to delete everything except the first child. So it's easier to just not have that be a child, right? Have this be just the actual search results. Does that make sense?
Okay.
It's easier to actually break it out as something else. That also means that I can then, easily go in here and say the next time you run it, well, we'll remove that class, remove that dnone class, so that it becomes visible again. So let's try that real quick. So you're going to see now, if I hit search, I may need to make this run slow. So let's go to network, change this to slow 3G. There we go. So with slow 3G, you can see it working and you can see the spinners there. Cool. So that deals with, making sure you reset things like that before you initiate the request. Make sure is kind of how you get around, making sure that it's not adding more and more results every time. Is you have to do some logic initially. The other thing we still need to do is let's say I put in boots. It's still not really using any of those values, right? Because it's still going to API search here. I think you can see, yeah. So regardless of what I put in there, it's still going to go and get all of the search results. So remember, this is a GET request. So the place where I need to introduce those values, I need to introduce those into the URL. So I might say here, const form data. I can actually just go grab all of the things that you've entered, because remember I can use that serialize method. So I might say $, and say let's go reference ID, search result, search form dot serialize. So I could say serialize the form data. That's going to turn it into a string. If I do a console log, we can see what's in there. So you can see what's being set. It's Q equals blank, category equals blank, because I haven't said anything. If I do 1 and 2, then you can see Q1, category 2, right? So serialize basically gives us all those form fields in basically the way we need them. So really all I have to do then is take that form data and tack it to the end of the URL. So I might say search plus form data, and then we'll be off to the races. So now it should be, I should be able to say hats, and I can't tell if they're just hats because I'm not showing their category. So maybe I need to fix that real quick so I can see.
Yeah, I noticed something too is that it doesn't tell you the number of search results. Is that supposed to do that?
That's something that you would have to implement from your end, right? That's something I had implemented in my example, and you can see how I did that. But that's something that kind of, it depends on, what makes sense for your particular application, right? So you can see how I did that, but it's That's not a critical part of this. That was in the example to see, that stuff's actually happening, because most of the time it was off screen. So anyway, in here I might say, let's put the item dot category so we can see that. And okay, so there I can see what things are at. Oh, those need to not be in separate card bodies. I need to have those both in the same card body. So category, description, and div. Put that in a div, close the div, and I might put this in a div, close the div. That's better. Okay, so if I can see that hats and boots are being shown there. If I type in hats, I should be getting just hats out. Cool. That happened. Boots. So now I've got these values being sent to the server, right? I could say maybe red leather boots, and I should get something coming up. There we go. So far, everybody kind of following along? Putting the piece together?
Yeah, I got it. It's probably be a little more trouble when I end up doing it.
Yeah.
That's all right. This helps a lot.
Yeah. So a lot of it's, just kind of, putting all the pieces together. My objective with that example had been to try and keep it, here's the basic code that you have to have. Your example will probably have more code than that, but these, this is the basic parts you need to know of how to use Oboe. So you can look at that for some guidance, but obviously the actual way as you pull it into your website will vary. And this is a lot where you come into like, well, there's different design decisions of how you want to display the data and different things. There's different ways you may want to implement the UI, but that's kind of the general structure. Let's see. Was there anything else I wanted to point out before we... Oh, one thing I wanted to point out is just quickly changing this over to a drop down instead of a field. So let's say I want this to be a select box. So this would be select, the ID and name is still category. And I believe this still would be class form control. But I want to put in some options in there. So option, and this initial one is no selected. So all categories is what initially we see. And then let's say you want to pick, let's see, we had boots. And we have hats. I can't remember what the other categories I had in there.
Buckles.
Buckles. Okay. So I'm going to turn that into drop down. So all categories, boots. That should give me just boots. Cool. So I can kind of replace that text input fairly easily without changing a lot of extra code, and have it go. Now, a common thing that happens from a user's perspective, let's say I go change this to hats. A lot of times it's kind of cumbersome for users to say, well, okay, I'll change the category and then hit search, right? Everybody with me?
You're talking about putting it on change on there?
Yeah, I put it on change. So I usually want to say, hey, if the user picks something new from a drop-down, then let's go switch it. So I might say put an on change on that. So going down here, I might say, let's look at when the category changes. Then I want to handle that event. And, well, what should I do? Well, I should probably I could tell it to perform search, but oftentimes I want it to make sure that it goes through all the same logic as if you submitted the form. So typically, rather than just saying, let's call perform search, I typically want to trigger, the event of the form being submitted. So what I would actually do in here is I would say trigger a submit event. And you'll notice that I'm not saying click on this submit button. I'm saying trigger the form submission. So that way that happens all as it would normally.
Mr. Smith, where is the code that says req.query.q, req.query.category? Is that up there, or did I overlook that?
So you notice this is going to what endpoint?
API search. So all the logic's in there. It's already.
Yeah.
It's the standard that we had. Okay.
Yeah, so if you go to API search, you can see that's what I'm hooking into, is what we talked about earlier in the week. I think that we talked about this on Monday.
It doesn't use all that's there, though. There's a lot of extra code. It just has to jive with what we did.
Right. So, well, if I was going to build this up further, what I would do is I would add an input on the form for each of these things, right? So I've already kind of on the back end, I've implemented space for a lot of different options, right? So I just used Q and category, but I could easily put in another field for color, another field for minimum price, max price, all of these things. I just need to add another field to the search interface, and they're implemented on the back end, right?
Oh, looking at this, I'm wondering about pagination and if that's going to be filled with, if it's as straightforward as I think it's going to be like before or not.
So what I would say here is honestly that the pagination matters a lot less. In fact, because we're doing Oboe and because we're doing streaming, I could easily turn this up to, hey, I've got 1,000 or even 10,000 items per page, and it really won't be drastically slower. Because Oboe's loading in those things gradually. So typically, you could actually have your page size very high once you bring in Oboe.
So you'd have a drop down that would have 10, 20, 50, or whatever. And
I wouldn't even put it in the drop down. I would just say the page size is always X on the back end and not have any sort of way to set it on the front end. Does that make sense?
Why wouldn't you want? What if I just want to see 10 on the page because I just don't want a full page?
I think the answer is it doesn't really matter. So let's say, I think, how much data do I have in here? Because I think that I thought I had more records in this table than I do. Because I thought I grabbed some dummy data and put it in, but maybe I removed that. Localhost connect. I've only got 26 products. I thought I added some more. I thought I added some more data to that. Okay, there's all my mock products. I guess I didn't import them, or I'd removed them. So let me go to products and bring in all my mock products. Add data, import file, browse, and we're going to bring in products mock, import. Okay, so I should have. Why did those products not come in? Something doesn't jive because there's a lot more products in there. So why am I only getting ignore empty strings? Why am I only getting 10? I'm not sure what I did because I know I had valid data. I swore I had this imported at some point. But why won't it import? Okay. Do I have to? Let me try doing that over the console. Over the terminal. Because I don't have enough data to actually see it. So on a new terminal, I want to go try this Mongo import command. So Mongo import. Not recognized as a commandlet. Okay. So I at least can't get to it. Mongo shell import Windows. Download the sample data. Okay, so Mongo import is the one I want, but why can it not find it? Let's see, so C program files MongoDB server. So we added this. added Mongo to there. So where does the Mongo import command live? Distributed with MongoDB. Okay. So 4.4, they moved it. And so syntax. Tools. There it is. Okay, database tools. So it may be a separate download now. Okay, so Mongo import is there. And I need to go to software. So how do you get to the database tools? Oh, there it is. So it's actually a separate, that is a separate download. I want that as an MSI, actually. Next. Okay. So I need to then add that to my environment variables. Because I need to also add that bin folder to my path. So take a screenshot of that and post it here. In case you do need to set up the database tools yourself as well. Okay. Okay. Shut down VS Code. Cool. Now I can find it. Okay. So now I can actually try to do the import that I was trying to do. So Mongo, I need to get to the right folder first. So cd data, Mongo import And we want to do this as it's going to be a JSON array that I'm importing. The database is cowboy boots. And the collection would be products. And the file that I'm trying to bring in would be products mock.json. Error parsing command line positional arguments cannot use both file and a positional. Oh, I'm missing a single dash for DB.
That's a lot of work just to import one little thing.
Yeah, well, let's import this whole file because I made a mock data for 1,000 objects for was it from
Mockaroo, right?
From Mockaroo.
That seems like pretty basic stuff though, like just building Mongo that's been around for what, like, I don't know, 10 years or so, and
something.
Yeah, it's not like we're the first people that come across this.
Yeah. Did that go through? Import document successfully. It says 215 failed. So let's see how many documents I have. I have 810, 811. Okay, well, something's still up, but at least I got more documents in that way. I don't know why the method and why it wasn't working in Compass, but that's how to do it over the shell. So let me get back to here. I should see a lot more data coming in this time. Oh, but I need to restart the server. So terminal node mon. Okay, so let's try that again. There we go. So this is loading in 800 documents, right? And still, I mean, you see it basically come in instantly, right?
Say that again. Sorry.
So this is loading 800 documents instead of like 20, and it still seems to be basically instant. And I can even test that on a slower connection. Using slow 3G there. And it's still, you know, I get those first 10 results quick enough that I don't know that there's, you know, I don't think that there's a lot of merit in spending too much time on paging. Does that follow?
Yeah, okay. I mean, yeah, that's fine. I mean, that's, you say it, we don't need it, that's good.
Yeah. The reality is yes, you would probably still do some, but when we have large, well, you'll see a lot of more modern websites nowadays, is I mean, some of the e-commerce ones still, you'll see like how many page, you shall still see a page number drop, like a page size drop down. But a lot of places, especially social media now, what they'll actually do is infinite scrolling. So this might pull down X number of records, which with Oboe can be actually pretty big. But then what you do is once you hit the bottom here, what I would do is then initiate another request. So I actually oftentimes kind of the modern way to do it is to load more records as you scroll down as well. But that kind of all put together means that the current recommendation is actually generally not to have a page size dropdown with using Oboe and things like this. Does that make sense? So you can still do it. You can still do a page size dropdown kind of like you used to, but it turns out that you largely there's enough tricks that you can use that it becomes a lot less important for the users to have a page size picker. It still happens, it still happens that you sometimes want that, and I could, with the code written as is, I could easily put that page size picker in if I wanted to. And actually, I mean, to think about it, if I were to just think about, what's already there, I already have a drop down here for the category, right?
Yeah.
So I need another drop down. And we know that it's called page size on the back end. So I would just say, well, give that, this is the page size. And so like the first record might be, I would say maybe 10 and 10 items per page, and just kind of duplicate that and give a few different options. So I might say 10, 20, 100, or whatever makes sense in that context. And if I want to default it as this one, I think selected is what I want to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you get 10, right? You scroll down.
Let me go back to 10.
Okay, that's easy enough to implement.
So, I mean,
it's a lot easier than with MySQL and the way we're doing it before.
Yeah.
That was a lot.
Yeah. I mean, once you start building up this API on the back end, and you can do the same way, you can implement this with MySQL. This is another way you can do it there too. But once you've got this kind of as an API, it's really just a matter of hooking things up from the front end. Mo, did you have a question? Does anybody else have a question on this? So I'll push that up so you can have the code and take a look at that, those details. But
okay, awesome. Okay, I got a question. Maybe this is in the syllabus already, but you could talk to it a little bit. Is the last day of class, the 17th, right? We're just gonna. Well, they have a presentation for our website. I mean, you know,
Okay.
mine ain't going to be anything too sexy. I mean, at least that's the way I think now. I'm going to get the foundation working where the search works, the CRUD works, but I don't know. I'm not going to wow anybody. This ain't like some template I'm buying where, you know what I mean? So, like, how's the last day of class going to go?
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Let me pull up the calendar just to make sure that we're looking at the right days.
I think it's the 17th.
Yeah. So our classes end on the 17th. That's right. And then we go into holidays. So typically what I will do, and this semester is obviously a little bit different because we're online. Typically what we've done in past years, not COVID, is usually I have that last day be a day where we just get together and have some fun, eat some food, and play video games. That not so practical this go around, obviously, and part of that's just making sure that I have time to grade because I need to turn in. I basically have to turn in grades on the 18th, final finish grades typically, that day after. So typically that would be a day where we're not doing any work to make sure grades and stuff and all that get in. So typically when I do the presentations is usually the day before that. That's usually when we do the final presentations. Would be on the 16th. Okay.
Oh, okay. And yeah, I mean, this is a little bit different than say last semester or even before, where I mean, CRUD's just not that exciting. You need it, but I don't know what can you say about it. Like, look, I just created this place. I don't know. Trying to figure out how to make it interesting. Maybe it's not supposed to be interesting.
Well, the thing is to it's actually more interesting than you give it more credit than that. That's because from an employer, it's the things you're trying to demo from in terms of in terms of what you're doing as a student is here are the basic skills that I've learned over this semester. That's basically what you're trying to demo is what you're trying to demonstrate and present is what have you learned, not here I built this awesome thing, right? And so from that perspective, CRUD is interesting, right? Because it's something that you learned, right? And it's a core part of what you should have learned through here. So that is an interesting part of the system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So we got to think of it more of the audience being non-tech people that are going to be in the audience, and they'll think it's novel and exciting. But to us, living and breathing it, maybe not so much. But
well, you got to recognize, I think I'm not really planning to bring in employers this year. I'd done that, I think, a year or so ago, but just things being what they are. So what we had done though in the spring, typically we would give these as live presentations. Obviously that's a lot harder to do in an online setting. So last semester I did have students record their presentations, pre-record them, and I'd ask that you do that this semester again. Is to pre-record your presentation, and so we'll pre-record the presentations and then show them on the 16th.
Oh, okay, all right. It's all in the syllabus, right? I haven't gotten that far yet.
But... I don't believe that I specified those details in the syllabus.
Okay.
I don't know if I've even written those details down anywhere at the moment. I need to, but that's the plan. Is so 16th we'll do we'll play all those recorded presentations of your projects.
Okay, it's like 5 to 10 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, somewhere in there. Let's see if I can pull up the rubric from last semester because I'm gonna basically go off of it's going to be very similar to what we did last year. So I'm going to go pull down that. Okay, so final project proposal, application. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and download these. So you can have an idea of what usually goes into that final project. Okay, so those are here. Pin. So these are from last year. So typically that's what I would grade on. Yeah, I need to update all the dates and such. But so you got the details kind of from last year. But yeah, so looking at the calendar, that's kind of the due date, the final due date for your projects and your presentations and your proposals are all due on the 16th. So that's 16th. We'll show your presentation on that day. Does that help?
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that. So yeah, just really like 13 days. That's it.
Yeah,
Getting
13
there.
days.
Getting there, yeah. Okay.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, so the expectation is record those presentations, post them up on YouTube. I'll drop them into a playlist, and then we'll watch that playlist on the 16th. So if you're curious at all about presentations from, I know that we can, let me pull up the playlist from last year. Where's my playlist? There it is. That's what I'm looking for. So you can look at some of the presentations from last semester, which was Android applications, but that should give you a good kind of feed on, what some of the expectations were by looking at, what people did. Cool.